I'm with Lord Griffiths of Burry Port. Lord Griffiths, welcome to Llanelli.
Lovely to be back.
And we've just heard your speech there, historic speech really about Emily Pankhurst and the Buckley family, all very familiar to Llanelli people. But you've kind of moved away from the area. You're now residing in London and you hold a very important political role. I just want to talk to you about that really, and how much of your upbringing and just your life experiences do you take into that role when you're delivering these speeches in the House of Lords?
Well, I have to say that you could never take those early years out of your experience, and they're very much part of my experience, and I'm very glad to say that. But what do they amount to? That's the big thing. Well, I lived in one room in a brickyard. My mother brought up two boys in abject poverty, and my mother was a very exceptional person. I've never ceased to be inspired by her memory. She died very early. But I could never understand how I lived in a world where someone as endowed, as gracious, as witty and fine as my mother should have to live like that. And so I had that question imprinted on my mind. Wherever life took me, I'd be asking that question. Why is it that good people are obliged to struggle for life itself? Others seem to do much, much better. There seems to be no correlation between what people should feel entitled to and what they actually get. So yes, it's been very much a part of my inner being, my DNA, really.
The world is changing beyond recognition. I mean, you're of a generation that's seen massive change, but you know, we have Elkin in the room here, a young man, myself of a different generation. Some of the changes, obviously, for the good, you know, equality, social injustices being righted, political movements being formed. You gave a speech recently on Windrush generation, and I was just struck by the adjectives you were using to describe what had happened to this generation of people: the homelessness, the poverty, the discrimination, the alienation, the complete disregard, in a way, for human life to a certain extent. And do you feel that lessons have been learned? Do you think we're moving quickly enough to address those issues on a national and global level? Or do you see very much a repetitive pattern in some of those behaviours and some of those consequences?
Well, I have to say that the Windrush scandal is exactly what's written on the tin. It is a scandal, because it's been established that a certain number of people who came at a particular time at the invitation of the British government are now, because papers were not provided at the time, finding that they're being discriminated against and all the rest, and I needn't go into the detail. But it is a scandal because the facts are known. The government has accepted the report that establishes those facts, and yet, year after year, we have not yet drawn a line under the iniquities, and there are still people from that generation who are dying. So, you know, you can compare it with, for example, the post office managers scandal, the Grenfell Towers scandal, the infected blood scandal. The facts are known. Now, I contrast that with straightforward legislation in the area of immigration, in the area of housing, in the area of the economy, wherever, where we'll be fighting for a bit more of this or a bit less of that, according to where we sit in the political spectrum. But these scandals, it should be everybody on every side of the political argument that puts their entire weight behind the desire to bring justice. And that's what makes me angry. I don't mind a political fight, and I don't mind when sometimes the other side wins the argument, as long as it's a fair playing field. The Windrush thing is not a fair playing field.
You swivel this bit a tad, just swivel your legs around so you're facing a bit more of me. And again, a bit more, that's it. We know, you know, the British Empire has given up its colonies to a certain extent. There's very few left, if any. We have the Commonwealth and so on. But do you see it now? You've got so much experience, so much vision of life in the UK and in Haiti. Do you see almost a form of British colonialism being imposed on our own people now?
Well, I don't think we've ever got rid of the old colonialism, and that's half the problem. We still behave as if the world owes us something, whereas we took something from the rest of the world through our imperial age, and I think there's a big fight on to get some of that put back. So before we ask the existential question about whether we are being imposed upon, I just want to establish the fact that we complete the task of giving freedom to peoples we previously enslaved or subjugated, and gave them some kind of recognition of a debt being repaid. We'll never be able to repay it in its entirety. It may need in the end to be a gesture, but it'll be well meant, well felt, as generous as we can make it, and then we can ask about our own freedom and so on, because we are the country. Imperialism is a pretty wicked thing. It brought all kinds of benefits, and in the days when we didn't have the social media, in the days when we didn't have jet flights, in the days when we didn't have massive migration, we could get away with the fact that we were running the rest of the world. But now the rest of the world has come to live with us.
We see, obviously, politics, global politics being played out now on our television screens, on our internet. More people speaking and interested in politics than ever, it seems. More people with an opinion, it seems. Democracy across the world, you know, we've seen the sort of onslaught of that, but then we've seen the sort of almost the diminishing of some of those democracies in China and so on, and in Russia maybe. Do you see politics in a good place? Do you again think that we are still going along those old-fashioned, tried-tested, you know, traditions of politics? Do you think there is something coming, whether it be in 10 years, 20 years, in a decade? Do you think there is a new form of politics needed, and do you see it coming within your lifetime?
Well, I mean, it's the only thing that's worth fighting for. I have to say that I have my moments of utter despair. I mean, there's a world that's committing suicide while we allow temperatures to rise, the ice caps to melt, people to be threatened by the environment, and there doesn't seem to be a momentum for facing the urgency of that question. So we may in the end be undone by our own supine and selfish unreadiness to act. So that's the first thing. Well, the other thing is, of course, that we are now, after we'd persuaded ourselves with the fall of the Berlin Wall, that the Cold War was over, now the world is no longer divided into solid ideological blocks. We're now able to see that that's re-emerging as a reality. And that, well, I mean, Russia is fighting against Ukraine and being supplied with weapons by North Korea, to say nothing of China and India. It still has a ready sale for its natural gas, although there are sanctions posed on it as far as Europe is concerned. So Russia, under Putin, is making a bid for some kind of rebirth. China has just elected Xi Jinping to be its president virtually for life. And once again, the economy is going down, growth is going down, people are less happy than they were. I don't know where disgruntlement and unhappiness lead to in the end. There comes a point when you just feel you must lash out. Now, in Haiti, the country that I know very well, they'd reached that point. That's why gangs and kidnapping and drug running are the prevailing order of society there. People can take no more. And when people can take no more, you never know what factions will take advantage of the despair and come in with apparent magic solutions, which often are fascist or totalitarian in one way or another. And that's a dangerous moment to be alive.
You're a man of the cloth, obviously, and just behind you on the wall there we can see John Wesley. You talked about the mass movement that was started, 250,000 people worldwide from somebody, you know, just a seed planted. Religion, obviously, we hear so much about it, and yet we see thousands of young men slaughtered in Russia, in Ukraine, you know, in wars across the world. There are people asking, I guess, all the time, and maybe it's a question that's put to you numerous times, where is God in all this? What is religion giving us? What part is that playing at the moment?
Well, it's a good question, and all I can say is that my belief, my own faith itself, is based upon the fact that God not only made us, but gave us freedom, and we are using our freedom in the most extraordinarily lavish and selfish way. John Wesley, whom you quoted, was a gentleman and could have been very comfortably off. He died a pauper. He gave all his money away. He formulated a principle that I've tried to live by: don't go to those who need you, go to those who need you most. And if only we could recognize that in serving the well-being of others, we do ourselves a favor. Instead of which, we're insecure. In order to build our security, we want to have a bit more money, a bit more financial strength. We need to be well equipped to fight the battles that have to be fought. And it's entirely the wrong model. That strength doesn't come from the accumulation of being, of goods and property, and stuff, or even positions and power. Real power comes from the capacity to find inside yourself the ability to identify with those who are worse off than you are yourself. And if only we could take that principle and put it into practice. Now, religion is positioned to do that, instead of which, what is religion doing? It's quarrelling about homosexuality. What is it doing? It's wondering whether it can shut a church or open a church. What is it doing? It is trying to prove that it's still as strong as it once was. It's denying the changed circumstances. I mean, until we inspire people to see that the road to self-fulfillment is via a route-marked self-sacrifice, I don't think we have a chance. That goes against the grain. People aren't made naturally to do that. There has to be a conversion of some kind to see things that way. Then religion will be doing its job. At the moment, we're concerned about the wrong things.
And you talk about conversion there. Obviously, one of the most famous people in Wales of that time, or for that phrase, was Evan Roberts, who, as you alluded to in there, with John Wesley, Lord Soper, all of these people preached outside to the people at ground level. Are we seeing enough of that? Do we need more ministers? Do we need more people in the church to do that? Take it to the people?
Well, it needs, I mean, you know, religion is about the deeds that you do to make the world a better place. You can then talk about what inspires you to do that, and that's where theology and faith come in. But doing good is definitely the measuring rod. And you only do that when you put your shoulder to the wheel with others, and you don't have airs and graces, you don't have hierarchies. I mean, the great thing about John Wesley was he was a man of the people. I mean, he was a gentleman. And he had a conversion period in 1732 where he learned to preach in the open air. It was in Bristol, it was in the coal mines, and he was challenged. Say something to these miners. And in his journal, he puts the immortal words, "I consented to become more vile." Namely, I've been washing my hands and being a pretty boy up to now. It's time I got rough.
Get your hands dirty.
Get my hands dirty and got on with things where people are. And then, I mean, it was fantastic what happened after that. He was into communities, he was at market crosses, he was preached from upper story windows, he got into people's homes, he had people on the ground, he was in the open air. He was, and there was never any, I mean, I think of church leaders now, and there's something about hierarchy, either a hierarchy based on personality, somebody who's charismatic, or on the way the church is structured, so that, for example, in the Church of England, I often tease them, you can be reverend, you can be right reverend, you can be very reverend, you know, and you can be most reverend. And you think to yourself, well, what on earth is that all about? I mean, I'm a working class boy. I have to say that I've been down that line too. You know, I had 10 years in higher education. I had no entitlement to that. I mean, I was a boy from the gutters. But things broke for me. I got to the grammar school. I did well at the grammar school. I went to university. I taught in university. I went to Cambridge University. I had 10 years.
Yeah.
And then the church sent me to Haiti because I could speak French, the language of Haiti. I found I had 48 churches to look after. My first appointment, when nobody spoke French. And suddenly, this clever boy with 10 years higher education can do nothing. I can't open my mouth without people laughing at me. And those lovely, illiterate, peasant people of Haiti, they healed my wounds, they taught me their language, their culture, they took me as one of them, they were generous to a fault, and they put me back in touch with the boy I'd been before my education. And so to me that was true, just to finish that off, they did for me what all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't do for Humpty Dumpty.
And this is the thing, we have a society that is hell-bent on the word inclusion.
Yes.
Inclusion should not exist. The word, the term, the movement of inclusion, we should all be equal but different. And there you've given a great example of perfect inclusion, albeit on an organic level.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It shouldn't, but then how many annual dinners of national charities have I spoken at and said, you know, I hope that this time next year the charity will go out of existence, that we shouldn't be having a charity to look after people, children's needs and different kinds of problems and so on. The charity exists to help them, and we've got to give money for it. But I wish it didn't exist.
And traditionally it used to be white man's guilt for the African nations.
Well, that's true too.
We've come full circle on this. We're back in Llanelli. Do you, one final question. The grammar school obviously played a very important part in this because you've learned these languages and you became an academic to a certain extent. Do you think that would have happened if you'd gone to any other school?
It wouldn't have. My brother didn't go to the grammar school, and his life was as different as could possibly be. He went to a secondary modern school, which is a good secondary modern school in Burry Port. But the thing all the children had in common in that school was that they were there because they failed an exam.
Right.
And my brother then went on into an apprenticeship, which he didn't finish because the skill he was learning was going out of fashion. Hot metal, it's all computerized. So he went into the forces and he stayed at the level of a private for about 8 years. And then he came out and worked in a factory as a factory hand. And then he became a trade union official, a shop steward. And then he went on and did things in the union. But, I mean, his friends, if we crossed on the street, Station Road in Burry Port, refused to believe that I was his brother. And my friends refused to believe that he was mine because he was a teddy boy. He liked his beer and rugby and stuff. And I was a bit more prim and proper. But for all that, my life has been made what it has by the grammar school.